front of the jury. So I believe it can be withdrawn on agreement of the parties unless for some reason the state wants this or the defense wants it part of the record for any appellate purposes later.
And I think it's 621.
I have it in front of me. It's marked 627.
Oh, okay, 627. All right. I think it might be marked twice then through inadvertence. In any event, we do withdraw that. We're not going to use it. But what my plan is to talk to Mr. Spiller in general about the case. It was brought up by the state in their case. They brought up this case with both Dr. B and Ms. Kurczewski. They both talked about it. And so what we plan to do is to ask about it in more general terms. Was there a case discussed in it? Was there a case that was mentioned in this trial involved that has had media attention, and that the jury saw exhibits about newspaper articles and other media attention that you have personal knowledge about? I think something along those lines, and then ask questions about it so that he can.
I want an offer of proof in terms of what questions would be asked and what his answers may be, because this was brought up by Dr. Bizricki very generally in terms of her familiarizing herself with tetrahydrozoline and her reading some media accounts and being aware that there was an allegation. I think she clearly acknowledged she didn't have any type of detail regarding that.
She did put it on her chart. She presented a chart. So not only
I understand that, but in terms of just knowledge that there's been a allegation by the defense that no one can die from tetrahydrozoline, that it's not possible. And her testimony was that she, familiarized herself. There was some literature and was aware of another case that's pending, but she hasn't reviewed the case. She wasn't involved in the case, in any way. And I do know that Dr. Kurczewski also has information. She was very careful, I think, in her testimony regarding her research and her study, that information was not include any details so as not to, identify anyone. And I'm just looking for my notes on how this came up. Hold on, let me just look through my notes, please. Actually, I think she said it was not included. She said she was aware of a level, or no, sorry, there was a question regarding that to her by the defense. So what is your offer of proof as to what detail? I mean, I'm not going to be pending in Colorado. I need to be mindful of that. Every case is obviously slightly different. Certainly, I'm aware that there's an allegation that it, at least what I can tell from page 1, again, not a complete document, but it's a mixed poisoning and it has 3 different substances. I'm not even going to read that into the record just yet, but so give me your offer of proof.
Thank you. So Ms. Kurczewski introduced the case in her testimony and through Exhibit 211. And although you are correct that it would be the defense's position that you can't die from THC, Ms. Kurczewski testified that you can. in her opinions. She suggested to this jury that the woman issue in the case we're discussing out of Colorado died from THC. So my offer of proof is that I would ask Mr. Spiller to discuss whether or not there's evidence that that's what she died of. And his opinion, I mean, he knows that he would testify that when she was given these large doses of THC, she was at various times alert, awake, conversant.
That assumes facts that are not in evidence. How does he even have knowledge of that when this is
Because
a
he's
pending
working
case?
on, because he's working on the case. He knows he works at he's
But there's nothing to cross-examine him on if we don't have his findings as it relates to that. We don't have the police reports. There's a due process issue. The state has a right to cross-examine as well. And you want to put in
that a person in Colorado died from it who worked on the case and can say that she didn't.
what's the chart number again? I want to look at that.
211.
311? 211.
211. Plus the article itself, which I haven't found yet, but there was the article.
That was not put into evidence.
But she spoke about it. It was
At
referenced.
some point, if I can be heard, a lot of things have been misstated here by Attorney Cooper in terms
Well,
of.
that's why I'm looking at my notes, because I don't recall her testifying quite the way that Attorney Kugler remembers it. So I think I get the gist of what you want to ask this witness. And so let me hear the state's position on this.
So I'm asking that Mr. Spiller be disallowed from discussing that case in Colorado because I am not able to look at or share the underlying information about it with my expert. The chart that was put together by Dr. Bedritsky, not Dr. Kasinko, and it's pronounced Kasinko, in Exhibit 211, lists information that Dr. Bedritsky obtained from the media. It does not list a cause of death or manner of death. It merely cites that there's a media report of a suspected homicide, and there is under it. Dr. Bedritsky did not form any opinion about how that person died. In fact, she said quite the opposite. Dr. Kasinko's only discussion of the Colorado case arose when Attorney Kugler asked her, aren't you aware that the case in Colorado, the cause of death was actually arsenic because she survived the tetrahydrozoline? And Dr. Kasinko said, in fact, there was recently testimony about that, and the cause of death was both the tetrahydrozoline and the cyanide, which I don't think Attorney Kugler knew. Dr. Kasinko knew. Her lab is handling the toxicology for that case. She's not able to disclose that to me or anyone. So to say that somehow we've used this Colorado case with any detail that's not available to anyone who can Google the case online is misleading. To say that I asked Dr. Kasinko anything about it, I think, is misleading. It was Attorney Kugler who tried to suggest to this jury that tetrahydrozoline was not, in fact, a cause of death in that case. Dr. Kasinko knew that to be incorrect, but again, is not at liberty to share the information. So I have a problem with the bottom line on Defense Exhibit 623 because it's a similar summary exhibit as the exhibit compiled by Dr. Bedritsky, but the main difference between the bottom line in 623 and Dr. Bedritsky's exhibit is that the defense was provided every single article cited in the chart. They were given the raw data that Dr. Bedritsky used to put into Exhibit 211. I have no idea why Dr. Spiller lists a level of 95 while awake. I have no knowledge of that. I have no ability to find out if that's accurate. I can't talk to the prosecutors in Colorado about it. So for him to discuss that case at all violates due process, is irrelevant. And in the sense that it's being put forth today as some rebuttal of something that the state put into evidence is simply inaccurate.
Well, Your Honor, those articles that the state is talking about include the article in this case. So of course, when Ms.
But not in the way that you're suggesting. I have no idea where this 95 comes from. Right? I know I have one page of an autopsy that references it. That is it.
Mr. Spiller's in the courtroom, if you want to, we could take
Absolutely not. We are not going to
to.
take an offer of proof and take time away from this jury and bring in a topic that you have mischaracterized the testimony of Dr. Bedricki and Dr. Kacinko. The defense attempted to bring this in and asked questions. Yes, it is true. The state has it on a chart, not for the purpose for which you claim. It was on the chart so that Dr. B explained and provided information of her knowledge of tetrahydrozoline being used. She didn't have the specifics. Dr. Kacinko is following her responsibilities, what I would describe as her ethical responsibilities about a case that is pending for which her lab has worked on. And even though she would not fall directly within the judge's order, meaning the order was to the lawyers, it was made very clear to me that if there is information that is out there, could be attributed to a party. I don't know who he works for. I'm assuming the defense retained him in that case. I don't think we've heard that yet. But I'm certainly not going to be a part of jeopardizing a defendant's case in Colorado with information that perhaps one of his experts has. Now, that's an assumption, but correct me if I'm wrong. Is he working for the state or for the defense in that case?
Let me find out. I think
The defense.
Are you working for the defense? Thank you. Yes, for the defense.
Well, I have more issues then as it relates to that, because I'm not going to be party to having the defense in that case violate the judicial order by having him discuss it in this case. So I don't mind basic questions about his knowledge. I mean, it came up, so if he's aware of it, I think those general questions are fine. But this chart in 623 and this level of 95, that is to be removed. I will not allow 623 in with that level. That there's no way for the state to be able to cross and incomplete records from a pending case in another state. And due process requires that I issue that limiting order here today and prohibit Mr. Spiller from talking about it, and specifically the level that he's referenced, and making any argument that a level of 95 can't kill you.
Understood.
Because I don't think that's supported based upon my recollection of his testimony at the Daubert hearing, and based upon my limitations placed upon him in terms of cause and manner of death, that he's not able or not allowed to, in this case, to render such opinions. I don't mind some general information. I think we need to be mindful, at least I would encourage him to be mindful of perhaps what are his obligations as it relates to the defense in that case, and the orders that the judge issued as it relates to the parties when discussing this case. But I'm not his lawyer. I'm not giving him any advice. I just think it's worth me stating that if I were the judge in that case, I might have some problems with this if it jeopardized that case. So
I do think there was an inference by Dr. Kurczewski that she's aware of a case where THC was used in Colorado. She may not have said she knew the cause of death, but what was the point of introducing it at all if it wasn't to show this jury that there was some significance out of a Colorado case?
she was specifically testifying about the novelness, shall we say, of THZ, tetrahydrozoline, and I would describe as her due diligence and familiarizing herself with it. She didn't rely on that case in any way in reaching her findings. It's on a chart. He can certainly testify that he's aware of it as well. But this 95 nanogram per milliliter level, and any specifics regarding that case, given the lack of ability of the state to cross-examine and not having seen any of this information, it would be improper for him and will be improper should he do that. It will not be allowed here today. So for the record, Madam Clerk, 627 is withdrawn. 623 will
The
need to
state's
be.
exhibit that was introduced has this case name on it. I just want to point out that it's on there. It says Craig Media 2023. Now we're being prohibited from mentioning what is already been admitted.
I didn't prohibit that. I said I would be cautious if I were him because he's directly involved in that case, given the orders as I understand them from the judge. I'm not prohibiting the defense from mentioning it at all. He can certainly testify about his knowledge of that case. But what I'm not allowing is reference to the 95 and any significance that it may have to this case. It's going to be limited to just what the state did in their case, and that's really that they're aware. He's aware of it.
Judge, in their chart, they were allowed to put in a level of 1700. So are you saying that we can't dispute that level? Because that's unfair.
My understanding is that level is readily findable with a search of open records over the internet, not attributed to any official document.
It's misleading and inaccurate. And if I can't introduce the correct information, the jury is left with inaccurate information that this court has allowed in the record.
The fact that you didn't object to that and knowing you had this information doesn't change my mind.
I didn't have this information until after this happened. I got this information and turned it over when I got it. I didn't know that that case was going to be discussed and didn't have the information.
But you had the information back up. When was the chart that Dr. B created turned over to the defense? That would have been that Monday or Tuesday, whenever you exchanged the flash drives.
And Judge, we had an original 211, but then we got a new 211. I mean, I had an original that didn't have that. And I got a new one during trial that had that on it.
I understand that, but you've had ample time even between the time that you got it and now to do any other research. And the fact remains, it came in, and you can certainly make any arguments you want as it relates to the jury. But I don't have anything more other than one page of an autopsy. And that is problematic. There's been an objection, and I'm not changing my ruling. So that needs to come out of the chart.
Judge, I would also ask that the clinical effects at peak come out, because again, that's all information that I have an inability to verify or look at. In terms of cross.
I'm not going to address that one because you've had, I think, this for a couple days now. We had a motion hearing. He's a toxicologist. You can certainly cross-examine him on the basis for those opinions. But that
This
I'm,
is specific to the victim in the case though, and during her hospitalization, and I don't have any information about that.
are we still looking at 623 or?
But I agree, he's a toxicologist. He can talk about how all these substances affect the human body, but this is a discussion about one victim in Colorado taken from apparently her medical records while she was in the hospital before she died. That's where the level comes from. That's where these clinical effects at peak come from. Those are all taken from discovery in this Aurora, Colorado case that I am not able to look at. So I don't know if it's correct. I don't know what day in the hospitalization these symptoms occurred.
Oh, you're saying that's his opinions as it relates to the Aurora, Colorado victim, not
Correct.
Ms. Hernan.
Right.
What does the defense say about that?
Well, the state introduced in Exhibit 211 symptoms for all these cases that I didn't have the underlying data about.
Yes, she did.
No,
I
I
gave
have
them all to her. That's the difference between these exhibits,
I
Judge.
have an article. I don't have underlying police reports or medical records. I have,
Neither did Dr. Bedritsky, and that's why she turned over what she used to make this chart. It's very clear on 211 that there's a whole section broken apart from the rest of the chart because she acknowledged these are not peer-reviewed articles. They all say media. There's limited information about them, and that's why she doesn't have a lot of the boxes filled in.
Anything else, Attorney Kukler?
nope, I've made my record.
So is this entire 623 all about the victim in the Colorado case?
No, Your Honor, this is in response to the introduction of Exhibit 211.
The final line on Exhibit 623 is all specific information about the victim whose name is on it in Colorado.
So,
That's true.
okay, I think I misunderstood. You're not talking about clinical effects at peak for all the entries, just the last one. My ruling is I understood my ruling to be that whole line is coming out.
Okay, I didn't.
So, and I didn't make that clear. It should, because of the inability of the state to review any of this information in detail, the records that were turned over are incomplete. I mean, again, I can see that from the 2 pages of the medical records reference 130 pages. There's other bait stamps that are on there. It's clear to me it's very incomplete. And I would just be mindful. Well, I don't know what's out in the media or not. Any reference probably should just use the last name. But if that information is readily available, I guess, over the internet, I think people testifying, and Mr. Spiller more specifically, sort of referenced that at his own peril and whether it will have any bearing on the Colorado case. But that last part of that chart, that last row as it relates to the Colorado case, I will not. It's either going to be redacted, it will not come in, or it just, we need to have a new 623 without that. That doesn't mean he can't testify generally about his knowledge of it, his awareness, but I am prohibiting him from specifically referencing the 95 NG and its effect on the Aurora, Colorado victim.
Understood. Could we have a moment then to ask Madam Clerk if she can use a redaction tool and we could just take out that line? This is our last witness of the day. Or of the case, I should say.
You don't want to make a new one?
How I have no ability. I don't have a printer or.
Well, if you don't, you have it on your computer, as usually these are either Word documents or Excels. You can email, then she can print it, but that's up to you.
Okay, sure. If we can have a few minutes, I can work on that.
We'll be off the record.
Well, that was certainly a spirited debate. I didn't catch how long they're off the record for, and there seems to be some debate if the last witness is going to even get called, since the judge didn't go along with the defense's theory regarding there's never been a death from tetrahydrozoline. And I don't know why they're not mentioning the Carolina cases, because we know that there were 2 in the summer prior to Lynn Hernan's death. So, yeah, sorry. Got a little swallowed the wrong way. I didn't catch it. Somebody saying so Jessy's not going to testify in her defense. I didn't catch that. It's a little tempting to go back and listen to the last couple minutes. But let's see. Ooh, ouch. Let's take a quick look at see if they have anything on the taking care of Maya. Their jury is deliberating, and I guess they were going to address some question with the juror question. Let's see. I'm not seeing anything. Oh, sorry, I'm having a little bit of pain here from arthritis in my shoulder and the bone spur. Need to take some ibuprofen. Well, I'm not sure how. Maybe the defense is deciding on what their strategy and whether they're bothering with their last witness. Let's take a quick look at what other trials are going on. There's something with the young thug. They're having a hearing. I don't understand that case at all. I tried to look it up, and I don't know. The trials with rappers, they just don't catch my interest somehow. Let's look and see what's going on in Judge Stephanie Boyd's court down in Texas while we are waiting to see what happens next. Let's see.
Ms. Jessy has been very compliant. She's not driving, so she's been very diligent at trying to get this done.
Oh, no, and she's looking great. I can tell that she's in her sobriety.
It helps.
All right. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
I'm gonna run and get my glasses. Sure.
Who is it?
And I'm trying to get the file applications. I'm sorry, I need to write something in there.
Look like you have to modification. Credit card.
one of his cases, two of his cases, I think we do on. So, which is the dog use for candidates with them, it should be one of them.
Other than.
Virginia Sarna.
Custody, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Sarna, if you come down, please. All right, so what is happening with this case? I see that it offers a Skinder and states you were to make contact.
So Judge, defense brought to our attention, there were 3 ag robbery CM warrants that were ran recent in the last week. We have no information on those, they're not popping up in our system, so I don't know if SAPD or whichever agency has gotten that information to us just yet.
And Judge, in the past 5 days or so,
All right, if everyone could please whisper.
SAPD ran a warrant, 3 warrants for ag robbery with my client. She denies all the allegations. But I don't have any probable cause statement. I did make a phone call to that detective and given some very basic outlining information, but I do need to figure out what's going on with specific facts. I don't know any of the complainants, locations, anything like that.
All right, so I'll recall this in December. Lance, would you have a date in December, no later than December 18th, please? And it is on Virginia Marie Cerna.
Thank you, Judge.
And Lance, they're saying that she has some outstanding aggravated robberies, and the state doesn't have it in their system, but
It's just fairly new. Yeah.
it says it's fairly new. All right, December 14th.
That's fine, Judge.
Thank you, Judge.
On here.
And Lance, could you reset all of her? She's in custody. Thank you.
December 14th. We're reset to December 14th.
The audio is just a little too hard to follow on this, so I think I'm going to look for something else. We've just learned. Oh, let's see. Looks like Judge Dorow's back.
Held a motion yesterday. It's related to final jury instructions and jury instruction 140. And my understanding is there's a new version of that that's been approved but won't be published until January of 2024. But Bryce Pearson, who works with the criminal jury instruction committee, he's their legal advisor, that Attorney Novreski had contacted him regarding a trial that he has scheduled before me. And he asked about the jury instruction. The email goes on to say, it gave me a copy, a PDF copy, and said, I've attached it and it's been approved, but is yet to be published. Please note that since this instruction will not be publicly accessible until January, the document is watermarked and not editable, but if I agree with the revised language, he could send it to me as a Word document. He's also communicated with the chairperson of the committee, Judge Maureen Boyle, who's from Barron County, who said was ready to address any inquiries I might have. And then lastly, Attorney Novreski and Attorney Nikolai will each receive a copy of the same PDF. So I thought it important to add that. We're obviously not to the point of discussing, but I didn't want to forget just to indicate to all of you that I received that email. I've worked with Mr. Pearson in the past on jury instructions following the case I had a year ago and some of the things that I did in that case. And so he's, again, the legal advisor to that committee, he works for the Office of Judicial Education. And so he's part of the court system. There's no prohibition of him contacting me, but I thought that was nice that he did and provided that information, which the parties have as well. All right, with that, I know we have our witness available. We'll bring the jury in and then you can call him to the stand. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Working? I think we're good. Yeah, good. Let's make sure we're creating feedback or doing anything weird. All right. I think you have to go down today because there's a chair, I think missing or not. Maybe not. We'll find out.
We'll discuss this.
I know, but if there's not enough chairs, then it'll be problematic. So
This is fine.
you will have to move down. I know. I appreciate the sentiment, but it's probably better from a standpoint of walking back and forth as well. It's that extra chair was only there because of the 4 alternates. So I appreciate it. I know she does as well. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Attorney Kukler, you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning. We call Henry Spiller.
Good morning, Mr. Spiller. If you would please make your way to the witness stand. It is all the way up to the front on my right, up 1 riser. When you get there, please remain standing, raise your right hand, and my clerk, Teresa, on my left will swear you in.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, sir. Please have a seat.
I got a cold on the airline and that's why I'm wearing these.
That's okay. I'm sure Attorney Kukler will make a record of it, but thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. You can hear me okay, though?
Yes, I think it gives me the court what's being said by the microphones and things.
Very good. If you need, there's volume if you need to adjust it.
Thank you.
I will ask you initially to state your first and last names for the record and spell each.
Henry, Henry, Spiller, Spiller.
Thank you. Go ahead, Attorney Kukler, your witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Spiller.
Good morning.
So thank you for being here. Did you have to fly to get here?
Yes,
You live in, Indiana? Or-
yes, I caught a cold, which is why I'm wearing the headset because my ears clogged up in the after the flight.
Between the flight and the cold? Okay. If you can't hear me, just let me know. Okay, so good morning. Thank you for being here. I'd like the jury to get to know you. And in that respect, Madam Clerk, could you share my screen? I'd like to show you what, and you have a TV right there. I'm going to show you, let me know when it comes up, Exhibit 544. It's there.
Yes,
And would you take a look? Does this appear to be your curriculum vitae?
it does. Yes.
And do you want me to scroll down? It's 44 pages.
Basically, it tells me my professional experience, various positions I've held, my education, and a lot of the research I do. Research was a big part of what I did, so I have about 250 publications. It goes on for pages and pages.
Right. No, I'll go into some detail about it. What I'm asking you is if this is a true and correct copy of your curriculum vitae.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Move for admission, Your Honor, of Exhibit 544.
Exhibit 544 is received and permission to publish is granted.
Thank you. And it'll be just a minute. We wait for the screens to come on at the jury box. There's a delay usually. It's up. It's fast today. All right, so I would like the jury to get to know you. And would you tell us a little bit first about your education?
I've, pardon me, a couple degrees. My first degree is in English and Spanish literature from Rutgers. My next degree is a degree in nursing, and the third degree is a master's in toxicology.
Okay, and you are board certified.
Yes, I'm board certified by the American Board of Applied Toxicology. That is the certification board of the American Academy of Clinical Toxicology.
So are you a toxicologist?
Yes, it's part of, you need to be board certified to run one of the 55 poison centers in the United States. I ran 2 of them.
Okay, you ran 2 of the poison centers in the
Yes,
US.
so I moved, not at once.
Let's hear a little bit about your employment then. Can you tell the jury about your employment?
Years ago, I started as a nurse in the trauma center, and to be honest, after about 2 or 3 years, I got out of there because it's, I don't know if you've ever been there, it's rather bloody and unpleasant. People punch you. So I went into toxicology. And from toxicology, I was at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I started to publish research. Kentucky, at that point, I think it was 1993 or 94, recruited me to become their director. So I moved from Philadelphia to Kentucky. I was there for about 20 years. And in the last 8 or 9 years of my career, Ohio recruited me to be the director of their poison center at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, and also an assistant professor at the School of Medicine at OSU, Ohio State University.
So assistant professor, meaning you teach?
Yes. Various, we would have 2 primary groups, pharmacy and medicine. So we would have medical students in their final year of School of Medicine, and then we would have them as, after they graduated and were doctors, they would have also come through a second rotation in toxicology. We would also have fellows. So if you have finished your residency and you want expertise, you go to a fellowship. And we would bring the fellows in also for a month. Those were the 3 groups in medicine: the medical students, the medical residents, and the medical fellows. And in pharmacy, we would have the pharmacy students, their 6-year PharmD programs. And then after that, if they want to work at a hospital, they have to go through a 2-year clerkship now. And so they would come back for another month of toxicology in the poison center. And so they would get hands-on experience with the toxicology cases. And there would be didactic sessions. We would involve them in research at times. We would try and make their experience better.
So you're teaching medical students and doctors about
Yes.
toxicology?
Yes, every day.
Every day. Now, as a director of a poison center,
We had one other thing. We had a medical toxicology fellowship program at the poison center. So we had specifically 2 ER doctors, 1 Air Force colonel who needed to know about toxicology. But we had a number of them after they had finished their residency. They wanted a fellowship in toxicology, and that is 2 years. The other, like if they were a pediatric fellow, they would come for 1 month, get a toxicology rotation, but the medical toxicology fellows would be there for 2 years.
And you would teach these
Yes,
students?
that's why they would come there.
When you were the director for 20 years at the Kentucky Poison Center, well, let me ask you, what is the Kentucky Poison Center?
There are 55 poison control centers in the nation. Some states have a single one. Wisconsin has a single one. Kentucky has a single one. Some larger states like California have 4 to cover their larger population. Texas has 6. Some smaller states like Rhode Island use Massachusetts, but there are 55 that cover the entire US population. And it is available it's free, and you get expertise. The people who answer the phone have to be a licensed nurse, a licensed pharmacist, or a licensed physician. There are no volunteers. They have to have one of those 3 licenses to answer the phone. About 70% of the calls come from home. My child got under the sink and found this cleaning product, or got granddad's medication or something. And about 25 to 30% are the emergency rooms throughout the state, who rely on the poison center as their standard of care for toxicology. So the ER doc will call in, or the ER nurse, and say, I've got a 28-year-old male who got into these 4 things. These are the blood, this is the, their vital signs, their initial labs. We would go through what we would expect, what they needed to treat them for. And we would become a toxicology consultant on those. They would stay in that hospital.
So in that regard, how is it that is that what you made a study of out of your career, is what the side effects are from drugs and expected side effects in people?
Yes. Toxicology has an odd, it's unethical to take humans and poison them. So I can't take 50 children. No mother is going to give me 50 children, and I'm going to increase the dose until the child is ill. So in many cases, we take because we have such volume, like for example, in Kentucky and Ohio, the center had between 38 and 40,000 cases a year. We would take this volume and we would find these cases and observe. If we could, we would get blood on them. We would do all sorts of things so that we could determine what we were concerned about. Which ones were the serious ones, which ones weren't. What do we do about those? In clinical trials for new drugs, there's actually sections where people volunteer for like $50 or $100 a day, and they stay there and they give them small amounts of the drug, and they give them, so they see what happens and that sort of thing. And it's volunteer, and they present these studies to the FDA to get approved. But we're working at doses that by nature, toxicology hurts you. And so we can't do that. We have to wait till someone does it in our region. And then we will publish single case reports, large studies, multi-year studies. And it's helpful because the other centers can read these papers. So then they don't have to redo the same study. They don't have to reinvent the wheel in California if I've already done it in Ohio or Kentucky.
So I'm understanding that you have these patients that are in hospitals, is that right?
Yes.
And the hospital gets a hold of you
Yes.
And either it's a doctor or a nurse or physician's assistant, whoever, gets a hold of you and explains what kind of poisoning sort of case they have.
What they have so far.
And
Because there's iterations. Like when they roll in the door, they don't often have the entire story. Things happen. So we follow them until they're discharged.
okay, so you follow the case till discharge from the hospital.
Yes.
Some of those people die.
Yes.
Do you follow them to death?
Yes. They're a different group. Of that roughly 38 to 40,000 cases, about 40 of them die. So we've had them as alive patients heroically. There are certain things that are they're deadly. So we follow them through their therapy, and then they die. And we have to, anyone we lose, we have to write what's known as an abstract on that patient. So we have to get all the information. We go and get the hospital record, we go and get the coroner's record, we, what we know about it, and we write up a one-page abstract on what happened. You know, why do we think this person died from this?
So cases that you might be talking about today in court would be cases that you have knowledge about because you've looked at these sorts of records.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Now you said that you have in Kentucky that was 40,000 cases a year that come through the poison center. What about in Ohio? Is it about the
It's
same?
about the same size.
Okay. So that's a lot of cases.
Yes, it's about 100 to 120 a day. It's a little busier in the summer. It's a little quieter in December and January, kind of. But yeah, it's about, so in December, we might get 95, 100 a day. In May, June, July, August, we'll get 120 a day.
So that's a lot of cases that your poison center is dealing with on a weekly basis.
Hourly basis.
Hourly basis.
Yes,
It's not just one here and there. It sounds constant.
it is pretty constant.
When you are looking at these cases that come through the hospital and ultimately that you're following, are some of these suicide cases?
Yes, oh yes. Of those, roughly 10,000 or so that are seen in the hospital, I'd say about 6,000-ish are suicide attempts.
So that's more than 6,000. That's more than one a day.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
It's closer to 10 a day.
10 a day are suicides that come through the poison center.
Correct. It's all over the state. I mean, they don't come to the center. If they're at, Kentucky's a fairly big state. Wisconsin's a big state. You know, I don't know the geography of Wisconsin, but they could be 200 miles from where I think the poison center's in Madison, but they might be in a hospital 200 miles. They still get the same level of standard of care. It's telemedicine. We talk to the ER doc. We get access to the electronic medical record. So we can just log in and see the labs, see what they've done so far, see how they're doing. We get a hold of the doctor or the nurse. You know, if there's a course change we recommend or something.
And when you do that, do you get things such as blood levels or urine levels on drugs?
Not all of them. Some they're pretty rare, and the hospital does it. They can get them for you, but it's about a 3-day send out. You have to send it to a laboratory, and by the time we get it back, it's 3 or 4 days later. We've already treated the patient. So, but there are others, like for instance, dilantin phenytoin is an anticonvulsant. We can get that. Acetaminophen, aspirin, alcohol. We can get those in like 5 minutes. So we get levels on some of them. We don't on others, because they're not done in the hospital.
And as far as urine versus blood, do drugs remain longer in one or another?
Yes, they remain longer in urine, and you can't convert urine levels to blood levels.
Okay, so when
Urine levels are used for, they're best for if you agree to not take a certain drug. Say, I don't know, you're a railroad engineer, or you're on probation, or it's a divorce case, or I don't know, there's some reason, court order, or your job order, or something. You say, I will not take this.
okay,
Urine, we can find it for, depends on the drug, 5 to 7 days, 7 to 30 days. So it's used in those cases because you've said, I'm not going to use this. And then we can say, well, you did. But it can't be back extrapolated to say this urine level means this blood level. You just can't do that.
okay, you can't convert one to the other.
No.
All right, I just pulled up page 5 of your CV. Looks like you're a member of various boards, is that right?
Yes.
And also you've won awards.
Yes.
You won awards and you've been elected as a fellow by the American Academy of Clinical Toxicology, it looks like,
Yes,
and you presented it at many meetings, haven't you?
yes. Presented in Europe. I used to work with World Health Organization and Pan American Health Organization, presented in South America, North America, obviously, and Asia.
And you've got 20-some pages of presentations. I'm not going to go through them all. Suffice it to say, there's a lot of them.
Yes,
You're invited to present all over the place.
yes,
Now, you've also written, have you not?
yes, ma'am.
You've been published.
Yes,
You've written book chapters, it seems, I'm seeing here on your
yes,
CV. For example, the Encyclopedia of Toxicology, you wrote a chapter in that.
yes,
And several times you've written chapters in that particular publication.
yes. And also medical toxicology.
Do other people in your field of toxicology rely upon these encyclopedias?
I think these are used mainly by non-toxicologists, like the ER doc will pop it open or something like that.
Okay, the hospital.
Yes.
I see. And then you've published articles.
Yes,
And you've published articles on a lot of different subjects, right?
been a long career.
But all having to do with basically having
Oh,
to do
that's,
with
they're all toxicology.
all toxicology. So you've written about the effects of drugs on people.
Not just drugs, snake bites, carbon monoxide, selenium, industrial accidents. Toxicology is anything that can get into a human. So yes, I'd say 80% are about drugs. I think there's 230 or 240 of them. But there's others, obviously on carbon monoxide. Selenium was a favorite of mine for a while. Others, snake bites, we got a new antivenom. We wanted to see if it was better than the old antivenom, things like that.
Okay. If I have, we can take this exhibit down. So I think that the jury gets a good sense now of your qualifications. Did the defense ask you to work on the case of State of Wisconsin versus Jessy Kurczewski?
Yes,
And you agreed to do so?
yes,
And you're being paid for your work?
yes.
So presently, are you living in Indiana? Do I understand that right?
Yeah, Louisville, Kentucky is a river city. I live on the other side of the bridge. So I'm as close to Louisville as you can be living in Indiana. I'm at the very southern edge.
Okay. Now, in working on this case, were you provided with information,
Yes,
documents?
yes.
And can you give a brief overview to the jury of what you reviewed in this particular case?
There was the coroner's report, medical records. There's a number of things. I wrote them in my opinion.
Well, let me. There should be water up there for you. There's water there for you. You bet. Could I show the witness and exhibit, Madam Clerk? Let me show you what's been marked, if you can see it, 545A.
Yes,
Does this appear to be a report you wrote
yes,
from July of 2022, it appears?
yes,
And it's 3 pages in length.
yes,
This is your report.
yes.
Your Honor, I'd move for admission of 545A.
A is received.
Permission to publish is granted. Thank you. Yes. for it to pop up. It's up. Okay. Now, does this help you discuss, for example, the records that you reviewed in this case?
Yes, I listed them.
And you reviewed the autopsy, is that right? Right?
Yes,
And you saw the NMS lab reports in this case
yes,
and supplemental reports
yes,
from the medical examiner,
yes,
medication inventory from the medical examiner, is that right?
yes,
Inventory of medications that were found at the scene, is that true?
yes,
And you've reviewed some statements and an interview by Ms. Kurczewski too, true?
yes,
And then since then, you've also seen maybe a couple of things that were introduced during the state's case that you reviewed. For example, maybe a chart that was prepared by and introduced through the state's case.
yes.
Okay. We don't need to show the report at this point any longer. We can just talk about it. Do you have a copy of your report there if you need it?
No.
Okay, do you need a copy of your report or you? Let me know if
If
you
you would
do.
ask me about specifics, it would help.
Okay.
I have 545A, my copy. I'll just give it to him and she can print off if there's any objection from the state. All right, there you go. I'm handing it to him. You're welcome. Thank you, madam.
So I would like to talk to you about the drugs that are at issue here.
Yes,
Are you familiar, and can you tell the jury about the drugs that were found in the system of Lynn Hernan?
yes. One by one or just list them?
Well, let's talk about them one by one and
Okay.
maybe list them first and then we can talk about them.
Baclofen, tetradrosaline, cyclobenzaprine, nifedipine, and ropinirole.
Those were the significant drugs.
Yes.
Let's talk about, did it concern you when you saw Miss Hernan too, right?
Yes.
And did you have some concerns when you saw the drugs that were in Miss Hernan?
Well, the two that were most dangerous were baclofen and nifedipine, actually three, cyclobenzaprine.
Okay.
They're the three that, honestly, if it rolled in as a case in the ER, you mentally start putting them in an order of what am I worried about, and what am I looking for?
For which three drugs?
Baclofen, nifedipine, and cyclobenzaprine.
So if you have a patient that you're consulting on in the ER and you see those three drugs, you become concerned?
Yes, very concerned.
Tell us about that.
Baclofen is a skeletal muscle relaxant, but it's rather unique. It is the only one that binds directly to something called the GABA receptor. GABA means gamma aminobutyric acid. The brain has lots of neurotransmitters, and they all do something. There's norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin. I can go through a bunch of these. GABA is the only inhibitory transmitter. All these others want to fire and they want their signal to go through. GABA inhibits the traffic. You should think of the GABA receptor as a stoplight or a traffic cop in the brain. That's its main role. It basically says, red light, you don't go. Green light, you go. Then it says, okay, green light, you go. Red light, you stop. It inhibits constantly firing. And that is how your brain manages like a billion neurons wanting to fire. It's a sophisticated system, but baclofen directly potentiates this GABA receptor. It's one of the few substances that directly binds to that receptor. And so it shuts down activity. That's his role. And it can shut down. The more you bring on, the more you get shut down. So if the level goes up, you've got red light, not red light, green light, and you start the brain will go from, groggy to comatose. GABA is one of the few not GABA, baclofen is one of the few drugs that will give you a flatline EEG.
What does that mean?
A flatline, we think you're brain dead. We do a number of things, but one of them is we do an EEG, see if there's brain activity, delta waves. And you may have heard of this from movies or something, but that's what we're looking for. And then we do a caloric test in the eyes and the ears, see if they move, a number of things. And a neurologist will do this and say they're brain dead. GABA will essentially shut down your brain. As long as you're on a ventilator, so we're breathing for you, GABA will just shut your brain down flat. So it's a fairly dangerous drug. There are a number of these. I had one case where we went through this brain death protocol and they wanted to take her off the vent. And we said, yeah, we'll have to wait till that GABA level the baclofen level falls. And when the baclofen level fell, she woke up and she walked out of the hospital. It is used as a skeletal muscle relaxant. Its main use is with people with cerebral palsy and spasticity, because we can shut down that spasticity. It's usually not given out, but it can be given out to people who just have, muscle spasms and things. I believe she had restless leg syndrome. But that's GABA. GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter.
Baclofen?
Baclofen, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Baclofen is the one that literally jumped out at me. That's a real serious one.
Well, speaking of that, have you heard of the term black box warnings?
Yes,
You do know what that is?
very much so.
Okay. I'm going to show, I'd like to publish Exhibit 579, which has already been admitted into evidence. Is this, let me know when you can see that in front of you, Mr. Spiller.
Yes.
And this has already been introduced in evidence earlier. Is this an example of a black box warning for baclofen?
Yes. Black box warnings, the FDA approves a drug and it gets something called a package insert. And that is
Take this down.
you have to go to the FDA and say, this is what we're going to put with that drug when you get it. And it's, you fold it out, it's like 5 pages and things, but it's everything you have to tell the patient. But that's often before, apologize, it's been out in the market. It's been approved, they've gone through the studies, but then when it gets out in the market, especially after about 10 years, we start to see some other things that we did not anticipate. It might be 5 years, it might be 15 years later. However, the FDA is responsible for safety and efficacy. It's still effective, still does what it says it's going to do, but they're now adding a safety warning, and they put a black box around it so that it gets your attention. So it is often added, depends on the drug, 10, 15, 20 years after it's been on the market, and they recognize this. And the manufacturer has to put it on the package insert on the first page.
Madam Clerk, I'd like to publish and show to everybody another exhibit that's been introduced in trial, which is 578. You just mentioned package insert in 578. Once it comes up, there it is.
579 was not received yet. So if you want to go back to that and do that.
579, I thought it had been.
I don't have
Okay, I move for admission of 579.
No objection.
All right, exhibit 579 is received.
I believe 578 is already in the record.
578 is in the record already. Go ahead, you can publish it, Madam
Thank
Clerk.
you. So this is an example of a package insert for
It
baclofen.
has the clinical pharmacology indications, like when you should use this drug, contraindications. and they have to get approval for the FDA for these. They can't just say, hey, I'd like to give you 5 milligrams for 20 days. These go through a long process at FDA approval about. That doesn't necessarily mean your physician follows these, but it's what the FDA wants them to follow.
And I see on the right side that there's, for example, signs and symptoms of overdosage and things like that, including disorders, coma, respiratory depression, seizures,
Yes.
vomiting. Is that all accurate information from your knowledge of the drug?
Yes, I should tell you, the seizures are slightly different.
Okay.
Baclofen, as I said, is used in cerebral palsy and people with spasticity, and they put in a pump. So they put they insert a pump under your skin. And so you get this very small amount regulated by the pump for months, and then you come back in and they refill the pump. If your pump goes dry, you'll get seizures. They're very difficult to treat. So if you do an overdose, it's kind of in the wrong place, but they have only so many places they can put this. So you get an overdose, you get respiratory depression, coma, you can get death. But the seizures are from withdrawal, and it's a very specific withdrawal. These patients that have these unique pumps, and they are, there's just a number of people that have these because maybe a spinal cord injury, maybe a cerebral palsy. There are a number of these that just have spasticity and it's painful. So they just leave that pump in and they just shut it down. And if the pump goes bad, the battery goes bad, runs out of baclofen, for some reason stops putting baclofen in, they can get seizures.
Okay. I see there's a section on the, I guess it would be the left side, about precautions. Do you see that?
Yes.
And is that significant, that first paragraph of precautions?
Yes, very much so.
So can you explain what that says to the jury, what that means?
Patients should also be cautioned that the central nervous system effects of baclofen may be additive to those of alcohol and other CNS depressants.
What does that mean to be additive to other CNS depressants and alcohol?
1 + 1 = 3.
Okay.
Synergistic.
So it really increases the
Yes.
effect. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. So baclofen was found in Miss Hernan, true?
Yes.
Now, should there have been from your review of the medical record, should there have been any baclofen in Miss Hernan?
No.
And that would be why?
It's about 9 months before, but don't quote me on the exact date, but a little within a year or so, there's a mention in the medical record where she tells her provider she can't take baclofen, and they discontinue it.
So she should have had 0.
Correct.
All right. Well, let's talk about the other drug that you said caught your attention as being pretty significant, cyclobenzaprine.
Yes, it's got another name, a brand name called Flexeril, and it is another skeletal muscle relaxant. It uses a different mechanism. It's a tricyclic mechanism and a sodium channel issue.
And can you tell us about, well, in that drug, should that also have been discontinued or not in her system?
It was, there's also a mention, she said she's gaining weight, one, she got a rash, and she discontinued both of those.
Now, before we get to what calculations you made, I want to just ask you, when you looked at the drugs that were in Miss Hernan and the levels that were in her gastric fluid or in her blood, did you ultimately try to determine how many pills she must have ingested to reach those levels?
Yes.
Okay. Now, cyclobenzaprine should have not been 0 because she discontinued it.
Yes.
Are there side effects from cyclobenzaprine?
Yes, it's a CNS depressant.
So
Makes you drowsy, confused. Excuse me. Sorry. It'll affect your blood pressure. Eventually, as the level goes higher, initially you get a tachycardia, but then you get a hypotension because it's the sodium channel poisoning. And there's sodium channels on the heart. So it does affect your heart and your brain. In the brain, it's, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of tricyclic antidepressants like amitriptyline.
Yes.
It's almost the same. It's just one lacks a central ring and the other one doesn't. One amitriptyline has a double bond on the central ring. Cyclobenzaprine has a single bond on the central ring. It's very nearly identical to amitriptyline, a tricyclic antidepressant.
So if I show you what's already in evidence, well, our exhibit is 538. Maybe this is NMS lab report. Maybe the state has a different exhibit. We have it as 538. Can you take a look at that in front of you in a minute?
Let's use let me just find the number because I do want the exhibits that have already been introduced.
All right.
Are you talking about the toxicology report, exhibit 35?
I think it's 35 then. We'll use that.
Nope, you can keep that for your use. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. I'm showing you what's, and I'm showing the jury too, publishing exhibit 35. Do you see it on your screen?
Not yet.
Okay. It'll be there
Oh,
momentarily.
there it is. Let's go. Yes.
Is that an NMS lab report issued August 7th of 2019?
Yes.
And you're familiar with this report, you've studied it.
Yes.
So going through, let's talk about, go backwards, baclofen. What's the result for Ms. Hernan's blood for baclofen?
1.1 micrograms per milliliter. It's
Okay,
pretty high because everything else is in nanograms per milliliter.
I
There are
see.
1,000 nanograms in 1 microgram. So it's a pretty large level.
Now, on their report, fair to say, when we get to page 5, there's reference comments as it relates to baclofen.
Yes.
And can you see that on the screen in front of you?
Yes.
And they talk about toxic blood concentrations are reported to range from 1.1 to 3.5. Is that right?
Yes.
Do you agree with that statement in there?
Yeah.
Okay. And Lynn Hernan's was 1.1.
Yes.
So you do consider that high?
Yes.
Is that above a therapeutic level?
About 10 times.
10 times the therapeutic level. All right. When going back to page 1, we were just talking about cyclobenzapine. Does she have, and she has that in her system?
Yes.
And the level is 54 ng per milliliters. Is that nanograms per milliliter?
Yes.
And that's in the blood.
Yes.
In NMS's chart of cyclobenzapine on their page 5, they talk also about side effects from cyclobenzapine. Do you see that? They call it Flexerol. I think you mentioned that term
Yes.
also. Does that seem to be accurate information there?
Yes.
So it has, those are common, or those are some side effects that could occur.
Yes. Actually, this is a pretty popular medication. It's not scheduled. It's a skeletal muscle relaxant. So for people with muscle spasms, this is often given to them.
When you say not scheduled, what does that mean?
The FDA approves drugs for safety and efficacy, and they say it is safe to use and it is effective for this, whatever you want your drug to be used for. The DEA affects only abuse. And so there are 5 schedules, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the DEA is solely after the level of abuse this sees in the public, or are people abusing this? And so you'll get on the scheduled drug, opiates, benzodiazepines. There's a number of drugs on the scheduled drugs. Flexeral's not on the schedule.
Let's move to ropinirole. You mentioned that drug.
Yes,
That's also in Lynn Hernan's system.
yes.
What was the result on the ropinirole?
8.7. Is that 8? Hold on.
Yes, I think
8.7.
is her, now the first two drugs we talked about, the baclofen and the cyclobenzapine, we wouldn't expect to see anything in her system
No,
because the prescriptions were done with, right?
correct. And they're bad boys. I mean, those are drugs lights up your light if you're managing a case.
What do you mean? Bad boys lighting up a case.
You might be in the deep end of the pool soon. These have potential for very serious outcomes. We might be bringing it. We might have to intubate them. We might have to bring on pressors. We might, this is ones that there are certain medications, for example, ibuprofen. I don't mean to say this in a cavalier way, but I don't care how much ibuprofen you take. You can take 20. We've had, people take 200, nothing happens. They get a stomachache. So in your brain, you kind of hierarchy these. These ones are the ones that concern you. These are the ones that don't concern you because you don't know what you're going to get when they roll in.
Well, let's talk about the ropinirole. So that's one that Lynn had a current prescription for. Is that true?
Yes.
And the level you just said is 8.7 ng per milliliter. Is that higher though than would be expected?
Yes, it is. A little higher. It's not massively higher, but yes, it is higher.
If she had taken it as
prescribed, it's probably 3 times as high or something.
okay. Do we have any side effects from ropinirole?
Ropinirole is something called a dopamine agonist. It is used in Parkinson's syndrome and restless leg syndrome. In Parkinson's syndrome in the brain, you're running out of dopamine, and so you get these jerky movements, and it's a difficult disease. This is used in that, and also in restless leg syndrome.
Lynn had restless leg
Yes,
syndrome.
so I'm assuming this was her medication for restless leg syndrome.
I pulled up page 7 of the NMS lab report with another one of their footnotes. Is 23 related to this ropinirole?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury what some of the first of all, you see the common adverse effects. I'd ask you to read it and tell us if you agree with it, with this statement of adverse effects, and tell the jury.
What's concerning here is something, the last phrase, symptomatic hypotension, which means you drop your blood pressure. A lot of these drugs, again, there's synergy going on. This isn't one drug. There's a bunch of these, and we'll go through them again, but all of them are going to drop your blood pressure. Not all of them, but a bunch of them. Baclofen, cyclobenzapine, ropinirole, nifedipine, tetrahydrozoline, all 5 of them drop your blood pressure. And again, you go through this, it's kind of 1 + 1 + 1, it doesn't equal 5, it equals like 9 or 10 because they're additive, because they're coming at it from different mechanisms. One's a dopamine agonist, one's a GABA receptor effect. We're coming at it from, so your body has less other ways to maintain the blood pressure, because I keep hitting, like, I don't know how to put it, but you have a number of, you have baroreceptors, increased cardiac output. We have vasoconstriction. There's a number of these that will keep the blood pressure up. You have angiotensin out of the kidneys. There's these, there's a number of mechanisms that the body uses to maintain your blood pressures. It's not one. But if we keep going after or knocking out the legs of the stool, and eventually they get hypotensive
Knocking it out with all these drugs, you mean, right?
because they're coming at it from they're knocking out the several of the mechanisms that the body's using to maintain your blood pressure. That's the important one on this one.
We've got, we've got also nifedipine, is that right?
Yes.
Now, nifedipine is on the chart from NMS, looks like it's 22 ng per milliliter. Is that right?
Yes. And there were
Yeah.
also 3 pills found in the stomach.
What's the significance of that?
The version of nifedipine that she had is a sustained release. Nifedipine is, as it's just a drug, has a half-life of about 4 hours. And it was very uncomfortable to get patients to be compliant. They had to take this drug every 4 hours throughout the day. A lot of them wanted to change drugs. So the manufacturer came up with a sustained release version. It slowly releases the drug. It's a wax matrix, and it just slowly releases like a sponge. And it just the wax matrix doesn't dissolve. It's kind of hard to break up, but doesn't mean you don't get the drug. It's designed to release in the gastric and intestinal fluids.
So it sits in the stomach for a while and slowly
It's
releases?
transiting to the other end. It releases it. So you only have to take one a day.
Okay, so you take one a day and then it slowly releases, works its way into through your intestines into the blood.
Right.
And then you discharge the capsule,
Yep. Comes out in your poop.
comes out in your poop. And that's what we saw in the 2 other nifedipines, right? That
Right.
were on their way out of her system.
Right.
And the 3 that were still in the stomach.
Yes, ma'am.
And you identified those.
Yes, ma'am.
Her, did you find that, would you have expected to see 3 pills in her stomach?
No.
Okay.
Supposed to take one a day.
And do you,
And again, it goes back to the blood pressure. This is a calcium channel blocker, and your arteries, not your veins, have little muscles around them that expand and contract. So if they contract, your blood pressure goes up. And if they expand, your blood pressure goes down. So if you need to run from the bear, they contract and blood flows very quickly. And if you relax these, nifedipine works on the calcium channels on the little muscles outside of the arteries. And it relaxes those, what are referred to as vessels, the arteries. And so they get big. And when the pipe is bigger, the same amount of fluid is going through, so the pressure is down. It's just kind of plumbing.
when somebody has pills in their stomach, that's the, is that reflected in their gastric fluid? When there's testing done, for example, here of gastric fluid?
Yes, yeah, that's what they're looking for. What's in the stomach?
And what's in the stomach has yet to reach the blood.
Correct. It is not providing an effect yet.
So we test the blood, we've got levels, but then there's also additional drugs in the case of Lynn in her gastric fluid, right?
Yes,
And those have not yet made it to her bloodstream.
correct.
When I look at the NMS chart, if in front of you at page 7, the reference footnote 19 talks about the nifedipine. Do you see that?
Yes,
And it has, it talks about in that last paragraph about overdose, adverse effects, headaches, hypertension, vertigo, muscle cramps, and even a couple fatalities.
yes,
Do you agree with the information in there?
yes, yes.
Okay. Is there anything else that you feel is important to mention about nifedipine?
Just that again, thinking about a stool with 3 legs or 5 legs, even 5 legs, we keep knocking out one of the stool legs. We keep knocking out one of the stool legs. And the blood pressure is going to drop. You're running out of quivers in your arrow. I mean, in your arrows in your quiver to support this blood pressure.
So that's what's happening with all these pills in this case. You're knocking out the legs of the stool with all
Yes,
these
you've got
pills.
baclofen, ropinirole, alprazolam, hydrocodone a little bit, but nifedipine and tetrahydrozoline and cyclobenzaprine.
All right.
I mean, you can just kind of go down the list.
Well, that's what I'm.
But their main thing is they have different mechanisms. Again, baclofen is working on the GABA receptor. Nifedipine is working on the actual arteries, the little muscles that shrink and contract the artery. Cyclobenzaprine is working in the brain. We can go through this. Same with hydrocodone. Hydrocodone is working on the mu receptors.
All right.
But everyone is, they're all different mechanisms, and it just makes it more difficult to support these people.
Is it important that physicians understand the interaction of drugs with one another so that they can be careful in prescribing prescribing drugs to a patient?
Yes.
Because they have to take into account these side effects, potential side effects.
It's a very important case. Alprazolam and opiates, hydrocodone. A black box warning came out in 2021, specifically for that. Xanax, which is alprazolam, came out in, I think, 1980 or 1981 or something. The black box warning came out in 2021. So they've been prescribing that for 40 years almost. But then they came out and specifically said, do not mix benzodiazepines, that's the alprazolam, with opiates, that's the hydrocodone, because they specifically cause a 1 + 1 = 3 on your respiratory center. And you start to get respiratory depression and or you stop breathing. But alprazolam's been out there for decades. And when the fentanyl and the opiate crisis and everything came out, it was noticed. And so there's now a black box warning on alprazolam.
Okay. And she had alprazolam in her system, right?
Yes.
We can see that on the chart at 67 nanograms per milliliter. Is that right?
Yes.
And that exceeds what her expected blood level would be if taken as prescribed.
If taken as prescribed, yes.
You could take that. Oh, no, I'm going to go down. That's okay. Keep it up, please. I will just go down to footnote 5 on the NMS lab report, and there is alprazolam. Are there any footnotes or comments here that you think are important to mention to the jury?
Yes.
Okay.
The second sentence of the last paragraph, it says, with other central nervous system depressants, such as ethyl alcohol, that's like alcohol, and alprazolam can become toxic at lower concentrations. That's MNS report, but the FDA black box warning is the package insert, and the FDA goes farther and says these shouldn't be mixed.
Okay. Let me show you. You talked a little bit about black box warnings. I'm going to show you. Well, I think I heard you say that alprazolam, a common term for that is Xanax. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And
It's the brand name.
I'll show you exhibit 580. Has that been admitted into evidence yet? 580.
Which exhibit?
580. Yes. Okay.
It
great.
has.
Then we can just publish this. I'll show you in the jury 580, when you talk about a black box warning for alprazolam, i.e. Xanax, is that what we're looking at here?
Yes.
And they have the big black box around it, right?
Correct. And you'll see that it was approved in the United States, just above the black box. You see it was approved in 1981.
Right here where I have my cursor.
Right. But just below, the recent major changes are, and they specifically say black, boxed warning. They don't call it black box. We call it black box. but box warning was put in 2021.
Even though it was approved since 1981.
Correct.
I'm going to just go back to, you know what, we'll keep the exhibit, my screen up, please. Just moving back to exhibit 35. Did she had hydrocodone in her as well?
She did.
And did, in her level was 15, it looks like, nanograms per milliliter. Is that right?
Yes.
Are there?
And you should know that one right above it, the hydrocodone
Yes.
or hydrocodone is, that is just a metabolite of hydrocodone.
Okay.
And they're both active. In fact, hydrocodone is sold in some countries as a pain medication. It's approved. It's not approved in the U.S., but it's approved in other countries as a opiate pain medication. So that they're additive. The 7 + 7 + the 15 are the same thing for the most part. They're both active. Mu receptor agonist is a fancy word, but it binds to the opiate receptor. Mu means morphine. But they bind to the morphine receptor in the brain, and they both do. And so she's had, they say hydrocodone free, and then hydrocodone. That is part of the hydrocodone has already gone through the liver and been metabolized and come out as hydrocodone. But they're the same drug for the most part.
I see. So she's got it in.
They're additive. So it's about 20.
Oh, adding them. You add them together. You consider them together.
Yes.
Okay. Now, does this, you've been talking about the central nervous system or the CNS. Does this affect that?
Very much so.
Okay.
Puts CNS depression or drowsiness, confusion, coma, how far you go. And it also affects respirations. And so you slowly reduce your respiratory rate. So it's we used to think, if you're just sleeping, I don't care. But if you're not breathing, I do care.
Hydrocodone, where they talk about it's more toxic than codeine.
Yes, those are morphine equivalents.
Okay.
They're used. There is a morphine equivalent table for physicians prescribing this. And you should have only so many morphine equivalents per 24-hour day for your patient. So they try and because they're all different medication, they're all different dosages. And so the CDC and the FDA have come up with a morphine equivalent table where you can go in and plug in hydrocodone, 1 milligram or 5 milligrams, and you'll get a morphine equivalent. And then you can use that table to say, okay, I can give so much of this safely.
I see. And this is an opiate, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's why they convert it to morphine.
Okay. Now, when these footnotes talk about things being toxic doesn't mean death, right?
No.
Toxic means what means what?
Untoward effects are occurring on you from this substance. Everybody doesn't die. As I said, we lose about 40, but that meant we saved like 39,960. So no, that does not mean death. We're usually pretty good.
And then there was also found inland tetrahydrozoline, true?
Yes.
And do you see a level of tetrahydrozoline in her?
Yes.
And that's an over-the-counter medication, isn't it?
Correct.
And that comes in eye drops. We've been talking in this trial about Visine.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yes.
But you can buy it in, it's not just found in Visine, right?
No, you could go to like CVS and get CVS brand eye drops with tetrahydrozoline in them, or you could go to Walgreens and get Walgreens brand. They're usually right next to each other, and they say comparable to Visine, that sort of thing.
And we grabbed a few bottles from the store that we could find.
It's okay? Do you want to see any? No. I'm going to show you some eye drops that we've marked as 631 through 635. Just have you take a look at them. Just show them to the district attorney first.
Sorry, I haven't seen these.
I understand. And so you said that you can find other eye drops with tetrahydrozoline at the store besides just Visine.
Yeah, they're generic versions, usually a little cheaper than the brand name Visine.
And then
And
there's
they're
also,
usually kind of on the shelf next to them saying, at least in my CVS, it says comparable to, that sort of thing.
and then there's other eye drops out there that don't contain tetrahydrozoline, true?
Correct.
Okay. So I'll just show you, may I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Exhibit 631 through 635. And if you could just take a look at these, I guess I'll turn them over. And if you could look to see if, for example, these sample of 5 boxes contain tetrahydrozoline.
Yes. Yep, 0.05%. Yep. Yep. Yes, they all have 0.05 tetrahydrozoline.
Okay, thank you. Move for admission, Your Honor, of exhibit 631 through 635.
Exhibits 631 and 635 are all received. Do you still need the exhibit that's up?
Let me see if I've covered my. Yes, I still need that. Because we're talking about tetrahydrozoline. And so you saw that the level of tetrahydrozoline in Miss Hernan as well.
Yes.
Now, what, do you have an opinion about that level of tetrahydrozoline in Miss Hernan? There shouldn't be tetrahydrozoline in her, is that fair?
That is fair.
I mean, maybe a little bit if you're.
Should be like less than 1 if she's using them for eye drops, like putting it in her, what we call tear duct.
And there's some indication in the NMS lab notes of problems with tetrahydrozoline, right? The reference comments number 24.
Okay, yes.
And do you have experience in knowledge about this particular drug, tetrahydrozoline?
Yes, I've published, I think, 3 or 4 papers on it.
You published on tetrahydrozoline.
Yes.
Okay, and we can take the, we don't need the screen anymore at the moment. Let's talk about you publishing about tetrahydrozoline. But I think before we do, I would like to show you an exhibit 628. Let me get this down.
Oh, yeah.
Can you see 628 in front of you?
I can.
And
Stop at that. Go back.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. Results.
okay, so I just want to know if you're familiar with it.
Yes.
And this is an abstract that seems to be authored by Sherry Kasinko
Yes.
and Michael Lamb.
Yes.
And you've reviewed this abstract
Yes.
and it's marked, would you agree, as 628? Did you see the exhibit number?
No.
Oh, let me find it. There it is.
Yes. Yes.
Are you able to talk about this abstract?
Yeah.
Okay, move for admission of 628. This was the referenced in the state's case.
I think it's already in evidence.
No, I didn't see it in evidence.
215.
Then I will introduce it that way.
Correct. The abstract has previously been received as Exhibit 216.
Okay. Well, then we'll bring it up under 216. And my apologies, I do see that. There we go. All right.
Do you want that published?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
Do I have the right part of this abstract
Yes,
up?
just the results are the important part. Don't go too far down that.
No, I'm just.
Yeah, results right there.
Okay. So this is not a fully written article. We heard from Dr. Kachinko when she was here. She said it's just an abstract.
No, when you go to a scientific meeting, which is what an abstract is, you're going saying, hey, I want to present something I found. You send it in. The peer reviews, I review for many of these meetings, the European meeting, the North American Congress of Clinical Toxicology, a bunch of meetings. Basically, all you're saying is, should it be seen here or not, that sort of thing. You don't go through peer review like you do when you put it in a journal. Then there's back and forth and there has to be answers.
So this wasn't peer reviewed.
In the sense of, if you're an academic going for academia, no. Like if you are in academia, published papers through peer review are part of how you are assessed. In your status. These are not considered part of that.
Dr.
It's not
Kachinko.
considered. I know I go through too, but
Dr. Kachinko said it agreed that it had not been peer reviewed
Okay.
yet. All right. Now, I would like you to talk about this article and the results. Do you have an opinion about the results that she's reported
Yeah.
in this abstract?
there's some real problems.
Tell us about those real problems.
All right. Right in the middle of the screen, it says PM. That means post-mortem. Okay. Next to PM, it says 112. That is the N. And that's how you say how many cases I've got. I have 112 cases. Okay. Then the next one is the mean. And a mean is you take all these numbers. If there's 112 of them, you add them all up and you divide by 112, and it's the average. Okay. But the mean is a poor way to look at things because one outlier, I'll give you an example. If I have a level of 1, 1, 1, and 100, the mean of that is 28.
Even though
But
most
three of
are
them
one.
are 1. What you want to do when there's an outlier like that, you take what's known as the median. Okay. And that's the second number. You see the median, and then range. And the range will show you that. But the median is 1.7. The median is exact. She has 112. So 56 of those cases are less than 1.7, which is the level that you get by putting eye drops in your eye. So even though they're found in these people that are postmortem, they're effectively clinically meaningless. And that half of hers are less than 1.7. You can find things at picograms per milliliter. And I respect National Medical Services for their expertise, but this doesn't show you. And the mean is 20. We've got kids with levels of 20. they're fine, essentially. And then finally, there's the range, and that's the third one over, and it says as, and this is what she's talking about, a post-mortem. Uh, (0.19-290). That suggests there's an outlier out there, 290, that has thrown the median off like just. So it gives her a median that's like much higher than the rest of these really are. You know, if you go through this in peer review, you would have, and I do peer review, I would have to have her smells of statistical trickery is the best way to put it. When you go through, and I do a lot of statistics, and you can kind of like, there's three types of lies or something, but one is lies, damn lies, and statistics or something. You can do a lot, but I'm trying to point out to you, teach you, this one is statistical trickery. The median is the one you want to look at. That is the meaningful one, and it's 1.7 out of 112. You know, and you look at the bottom of it is the range is 0.19. So 58 of those are between 0.19 and 1.7. And those are levels that you get, we can bring out the paper, if you put eye drops in your eye. Those are not clinically significant. And so I have a real problem with this because I think
Here we go.
we're playing with statistics. And that's why you go through a peer review, because this is what's caught. Someone else who is an expert in the field and does statistics looks at this and says, wait a minute, show me this, you know? And so they have to put the whole table out, all those 112 people, you know, and show you where these are. And you require them to say, okay, most of these are clinically significant. You make them put that in the paper because they are. So that's the problem with these. And the others are DUID, which is driving on a, they found it, but if you look at these numbers, again, 0.64, that's the level that you get with eye drops in your eye. And we have the paper, you know, 0.10 to 0.54, no, 64. All of those are levels that you get if you use Visine because you have dry eyes. She has an excellent laboratory that can get to not only nanograms per milliliter, she can get to picograms per milliliter, you know, 1/1,000,000th of a gram. But that doesn't mean it was doing anything. We're finding it, but it's an over-the-counter drug that people use. It's like saying I found acetaminophen at this very low level. 60% of the people probably have Tylenol in their house. That sort of thing. So that's why I have a problem with this, is that when you actually see the results, it would not fly in peer review.
Okay, I'm going to move to a different subject, Judge. If we're going to take a morning break, this could be a good time.
I think you are correct.
Okay.
It would be an excellent time for a mid morning break. I'll rise for the jury. It'll take about 15 to 20 minutes. Thank you. Teresa, is there more than one bathroom? No. All right, thank you, everyone. Please be back here in 15 minutes.
Just hold this, or
You can just keep it there.
Well, this is like pulling teeth. Oh, I'm just struggling with this guy. He's he'll from watching his mannerisms and so forth. He looks like he should be on the stage. He's a little too performative. Oh, so let's take a look and see what's what we've got out there. Let's see. Let's take a look and see if there's anything on the jury and the take care of Maya. Come on. Hmm. I asked for a search for take care of Maya, so what did it do? It took me to Twitter. Well, take and Twitter both start with T. Well, let's see if there's anything about a verdict here. Looks like jury's still deliberating over there. So, hmm. Got a new video from Lady C. Hmm. Oh, my computer is running slow. I think I must need to reboot it or something. Hmm. See if they're on a break over in the hit and run trial. Well, this is taking forever. Maybe during lunch break we'll take an intermission, reboot.
From the Dane or from the City of Madison Police Department, correct?
That's correct.
Indicating to you that the City of Madison had specialists trained in downloading data from the telematics system.
Yes.
And that data could have been relevant to your investigation as well. Is that correct?
I believe at the time we couldn't figure out what data would be in there versus the black box of the truck. I believe that showed Bluetooth connections and so forth like that. So that
Navigation as well.
was, navigation, yes.
And that was something that you explored with the rest of your investigative team, doing a telematics download of that data. Is that
I
correct?
believe we did.
And you wanted to make sure that you included within the telematics system. Is that fair?
Included that information in,
Meaning that you wanted to include telematics in what you were looking at, just to ensure that it wasn't, just to ensure that the crash data wasn't included in the same patch of data.
I personally myself did not know that data was available. And I believe that Trooper Marcourt reached out to the Madison PD detective who furnished that information. But I believe that information was like 3 years old that he furnished, excuse me, furnished us. So
Okay. Did you personally contact any member of the Madison Police Department to see if they would be willing to come down and do a telematics download?
I did
for you?
not, no.
And you're aware that the scope of investigator search warrant permitted the download of telematics data?
If it was included in the search warrant, yes.
Other than just, was this a conscious decision to not download the data, Captain Zimmerman, or was this something that kind of slipped through the cracks?
After the information I received, I believe it was at a later time from Trooper Marcourt, as I explained earlier about how many times the vehicle, the data that was stored there
That's why we did not.
You're saying that's specific to the telematics data as well? Or specific to the crash data?
Crash data.
Is there, was there a conscious decision to not try to independently download the telematics data?
I imagine there was. Like I said, I don't recall that, so.
Okay. And I'm just gonna highlight a section of Exhibit 519 here. And just read this out loud. Here's that Trooper Mark indicated to you that, quote, just running over the mail may not have set one off, but if it was substantial, then my recommendation is that we pull the data just to be sure you are not missing something. Did I read that quote correctly?
Yes.
All right, Captain Zimmerman, let's talk about the camera system. I just want to ask you this, that you agree that there's no evidence that Ms. Phillips deleted any videos when she accessed that system on February 23rd, correct?
That was the information I received from the Blink company, yes, is that there was no deleted files.
And the files are saved to the cloud when there's a motion activated trigger. Is that your understanding?
Yes, it is.
And your understanding was that those cameras were originally disarmed by Mr. Phillips's cell phone on February 21st of 2019?
Yes,
You've been able to corroborate that via the records?
yes,
Now, the feeds that Ms. Phillips were viewing were live, is that correct?
correct. Those are live feeds, yes,
And those feeds will not generate cloud-based storage, is that correct?
that's correct.
Did you have a chance to review any of the video footage that was preserved from the Blink security system in response to your warrant?
Just briefly, I reviewed the storage from the cloud on the morning of the 23rd, when Ms. Phillips exited the residence. I believe that's the only one that I viewed.
Okay. And did you view any videos from any other feeds showing the angle of where the cameras are positioned?
You mean camera placement or?
Yes.
No.
This is like my note to let you remember to address that because. I'm gonna write myself a note on that. This is my note. Just about that. I'll just put it here. Okay. You know what it's about. Yeah. We didn't use that and then ultimately we'll need and update it because. Yeah, we'll have plenty of time. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. And Attorney Kukler, when you are ready, go ahead. You may continue.
Thank you. So you talked earlier today about the fact that you've published, and we see on your CV page after page of publications. Well, let's just focus on a few today that are applicable to this trial. Okay. I'm going to show you on your screen. Hopefully you can see a document I've marked 546.
Yes,
You see that?
yes.
And now I'm going to the top of this. This seems, it's a case report published in the Journal of Forensic Sciences, entitled Drug Facilitated Sexual Assault Using Tetrahydrozoline. Are you the number one author on this paper, this publication?
Yes,
All right. And you recognize this as your publication?
yes.
Move for admission, Your Honor, 546, and request to publish.
No objection.
Exhibit 546 is received. Permission to publish is granted.
Just wait 1 minute while everything pops up on all the screens. So this is an article authored by you, and it looks like Dennis Seward. Is that right?
Yes.
So what's the significance of this paper that you published, sir?
Tetrahydrozoline was being used as like a Mickey Finn, drug facilitated sexual assault. It would be put in people's drinks. The alcohol and the tetrahydrozoline would kind of knock them out or make them compliant. There would be a rape. And it wasn't on, the FBI keeps a list. When you go for, say, going to the emergency room for a rape check, there's a FBI approved list of what you should check for if you can. And this wasn't on it. So what we were trying to do, these are clearly drug facilitated sexual assault, but we were trying to alert them that this was a widely used drug that was being in bars and other things, kind of to get compliance for sexual assault. And so this was, and we were successful. It was added to the list of urine tests when you come in for a rape check.
When somebody comes in for a rape check, usually is urine what is collected rather than blood?
Yes, they will collect blood, but often it's too late to find things in blood.
Why is that?
A number of substances leave the blood quickly, depending on what it is, how long it's going to be there. But we can find it in urine for days. And so that's huge. They will collect blood, especially if it's recent. But often these cases, they'll come in, it was last night, and they wake up the next day and they talk to a friend, and a friend says, you have to go in, and there's a whole bunch of stigma with it. But they do get in, but there is a delay. So often it's a number of hours before they get in there. And so urine is likely the best sample.
And so your goal was to make tetrahydrozoline one of the drugs that would be tested for routinely, as I understand it.
Yes.
Okay. When somebody's coming in on a sexual assault.
Correct.
And you were successful in getting that added.
Yes.
Does this discuss anything to do with the levels of THZ in blood?
No, we have urine because these two patients 14 hours later, they wake up in they're nude in somebody's house and they get dressed. It's a whole. It's very difficult, and often they don't come directly to the ER. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they're brought to the ER by family or those sort of things. So we did not have blood. We had urine.
And so these are people that have alleged that they've been sexually assaulted. They wake up and then eventually make their way to a police station or a hospital.
Yeah, the hospital.
The hospital. So does everyone who comes in that situation require some sort of medical intervention?
No, no. I mean, the intervention is they'll do, for instance, a vaginal swab for semen. There's a number of other things. But when you're talking about intervention, say, I need to support your blood pressure or something like that, no, they're awake by this point. So the interventions are forensic to document that this assault occurred.
I would just like to show an exhibit to the witness, Madam Clerk. 540, I'm showing you what's marked as exhibit 547. Do you see that exhibit sticker? And is this one of your published articles?
Yes.
Move for admission. 547, request to publish.
No objection.
Exhibit 547 is received permission to publish granted.
So this looks to be another article about tetrahydrozoline.
Yes.
You've studied it and you've written about it.
Yes. This was an adult woman, I believe 18. Her father was a pharmacist and he kept tetrahydrozoline for when he would shave, it would stop the bleeding. It's like a styptic. And she thought it was the mouthwash, so she just takes this big mouthful. And then they find out that it's not not the mouthwash. So we brought her to the ER.
And what was the result for her?
She was drowsy. We watched her for 36 hours. She had something called orthostatic hypotension, which means your blood pressure and heart rate change if you're supine, flat, sitting up, or standing up. If you've ever heard of people say, when you take this medication, don't stand up quickly, you'll get dizzy.
Yes.
That's orthostatic hypotension that's what it does. So if you stand up suddenly, your blood pressure drops, your heart rate increases. And so we said, this does cause that. But, as long as she was lying down, she was fine.
And
We have the amount she drank. It was about an ounce.
And so the case report is called prolonged cardiovascular effects after unintentional ingestion of tetrahydrozoline. Is that right?
Yes. She thought it was mouthwash until her dad informed her it wasn't.
And she was fine. She lived.
Yeah, she was a little dizzy,
Okay.
and especially if she stood up. So we had her lie in the bed, and every 6 hours we'd stand her up, and she'd get a little dizzy. So we kept her for 36 hours. We didn't do anything except watch her and measure her blood pressure and heart rate.
She didn't require any special medical intervention.
No.
Please off the screen, please. I'll have to show the witness only. I'm going to show you, Mr. Spiller, what I have marked as 548. Do you see that sticker?
Yes.
And then I'll take you to the top. Is this also an article that you authored?
It is. It
And
has the
this-
same mechanism as tetrahydrozoline.
Just
This is-
one
I'm
minute,
sorry.
please. Before you start talking about it, Your Honor, I'd move for admission of 548 and request to publish.
No objection.
Exhibit 548 is received permission to publish granted.
So before you talk about it, it looks to me like you wrote this back in 2004.
Yes.
So you've been looking at this this substance of Xanax back in 2004?
Yes.
Is it Xanax or?
That is Xanax, tizanidine, and it has the same mechanism of action. It is
Okay.
a central alpha agonist, and they affect the same receptors. Central alpha receptors that are in a place called the locus ceruleus and the cardiovascular center. They're little areas of your brain.
What's the significance of this article?
This is just very similar medication, and this is what happens when we look at several hundred of them. They don't die. They can get drowsy, where we keep close watch on them, but basically a day later we let them go.
I'd like to show the witness only. Do you see Exhibit 551?
Yes,
And this is a case report also by you involving fetal cyclobenzaprine overdose with postmortem values. Is that right?
yes.
I move for admission, Your Honor, of 551.
Exhibit 551 is received. Permission to
tell us
publish
about-
granted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Could you discuss this article in this case report?
These are two cases, case one and case two, that took an overdose of cyclobenzaprine and died. One had ethanol, and I think one didn't. Yeah, one just had cyclobenzaprine and one had ethanol and cyclobenzaprine. But these are cyclobenzaprine. I mean, this is, what year is this? 2003. We've been looking at these for decades.
The dangers of cyclobenzaprine.
Yes,
So you have people, cases that you're personally aware of and that you've written about of people dying of that alone
yes,
or mixed with alcohol dying of that.
yes.
And we have that in this case, right?
Well, we have CNS depressants, baclofen, alprazolam, hydrocodone. There are a number of them.
Could take this exhibit down. I'd like to show you Exhibit 626. Do you see that exhibit sticker?
Yes,
And this is an article that you co-authored with others?
yes,
It's a report, is that fair?
yes. This is NPDS, which is the National Poison Data System.
Okay, 1 minute,
I'm sorry.
that's okay. Your Honor, move for admission of 626 and request to publish.
No objection. Exhibit 626 is received. Permission to publish granted.
Go ahead now, tell us about this.
Okay. All poison centers electronically supply their cases in real time to a national database. The FDA and the CDC also monitor this database along with the poison centers. There are roughly 2 million cases in NPDS per year. When I talk about my center had about 38 to 40,000 each year. When you add up all 55, there's some bigger, smaller ones. There's roughly 2,000 cases. If you're a director of a poison center, you have access to this. So you can go in and ask questions that we don't have answers to yet. So we're looking at, what's changing, what we're seeing, a number of other things. And the over-the-counter analgesics, this is specifically aspirin, which you know is aspirin, acetaminophen, which you know is Tylenol, and ibuprofen, which you may know as Motrin. So we looked at those three in that database over 19 years, 2000 through 2019. So we can get trends over decades, trends over across the US. Are there trends over gender, trends? I mean, we look for everything.
I'm going to show you, could you take that down, please? Well, actually, there it is. I have it right up handy. We can put it right back up again. States Exhibit 211 that's been introduced in this trial. Do you see this? And have you seen this before?
Yes. Didn't study it a lot, but yes, it was someone else's exhibit.
That's right. If you would like a hard copy, if it's easier to read, I have one here I could give you.
I can see it, I think.
All right. Are there, as far as you know, looking at this 2-page document, do you know just see if I have the right exhibit up.
Yes.
There's another one. Yeah, there's couple copies of 211 and excuse me a minute, Madam Clerk, while I find the other one. Two 211s. Just bring up, I think, what is a larger version. There we go. Okay, we can bring it back up again. This is maybe a little easier to read, right?
Sure.
Okay. Now, without getting into a particular case name, are you familiar with some of the information that's on this chart?
Yes, yes.
Are there items in this chart that you believe are in error or
Objection.
Sustained, rephrase.
do you have information, personal knowledge of information that would suggest that some of this, the information related to, for example, a suspected homicide, it may be in error?
Objection is for sidebar.
Sidebar, please. The objection is sustained. The prior question is struck. The jury will disregard that question and any attempt to answer it at this point. Please move on.
We will move on. Without talking about specifics in the Exhibit 211, can I just ask, as a director of Poison Center or in the work you do you work on cases such as those that are mentioned in Exhibit 211, without going into any specifics?
Yes.
You have familiarity because you look at records and you deal with the hospitals directly.
Yes, they have to call us directly.
We heard testimony in this trial early on about a study that was done with where levels were measured in subjects by actually putting eye drops in their eyes.
Yes.
Are you, you familiar with that particular study?
Yes.
Is that one of the ones that was on this chart too?
Yes, the third one down, Carr et al.
We could publish this. I think that's okay. So the third one down, are you talking about?
What was the next page?
Oh, all right.
It's like in the middle, Carr et al. 2011.
Carr et al.
It's like right in the middle.
Okay. I see. Right there. Right there where I'm highlighting Carr 2011.
Yes.
All right. I'm just going to ask that this be taken down so I don't show anything else. Can you tell the jury about what you know about that particular study?
Yes. Because we had gotten it on the list of things to check for in drug-facilitated sexual assault, there were people saying, how do you know that level means what? So that study basically put eye drops in and said, you know, here's the blood level you'll get and the urine level you'll get if you're just using it like directed. It was to give people a level that they could say, you know, it's way over this. You know, it's not the defense saying she used eye drops, you know, can't be valid. So they were just, again, this is toxicology, so we can't do everything we want. But this one was used specifically to give a, being we had gotten it on the urine list, now you had levels that said, you know, above, here's a normal level if you're just using eye drops.
It seems important to know that because I think it's maybe a surprise to people that you put eye drops in your eyes and it can end up in your bloodstream.
Visine never applied for as an oral medication. They did not apply to the FDA, and the FDA it did not require blood levels or urine levels or anything. They require safety and efficacy. So there are no studies during the application of Visine and others to get it approved as a ocular drop. And so they were just kind of almost all other drugs, certainly all the drugs that you're either injecting or ingesting, you know, and you go to the FDA, you're going to have these clinical trials. You're going to say, if I give you 1 milligram once a day, 2 milligrams once a day, 3 milligrams, this is what you'll see. This is what we'll find in the urine. This is how long it takes to clear. These are whole things that, you know, you've got to have so that you know, that do I repeat the medication 4 hours later or the next morning? Or there's a whole bunch of stuff. Visine has none of that because it's just a topical. And so that data doesn't exist.
But we have a little bit of data.
Yes.
Now, I heard some testimony, I think, if I heard it correctly, that Visine is banned in France. Do you know anything about
that? That is not true.
That's not true?
No, what it is each country approves their own medications. There's no national do, you know, here. We have the FDA, you know, but like I would work in South America, in Ecuador and Guyana, and you couldn't get hydrocodone down there, but you could get hydrocodone. They approved hydrocodone, but not hydrocodone. I don't know why, but they do. Each country has its own judgment, its own regulatory mechanism. And in France, there are other vasoconstrictors. There's Nefazoline, which we know as Afrin spray.
Yes.
There's a bunch of these others. There's 3 of them that I'm blanking on the third one, but Nefazoline and Afrin, tetrahydrozoline and Visine that you can use for this purpose. And they do have nifazoline in France. They just said, we don't need another one. So the company, by then it was probably off label, so they weren't going to be able to be the only producer of it. And it's an expensive proposition to go through these. And so they just never did. So it's not sold in France, but it's not banned in France. It's just never been approved.
Now, you, as part of your work in this case, did you calculate as best you could how many pills Lynn Hernan ingested in order to have the levels she had in her system?
Yes, I used both the blood level and the gastric fluid level. Because several things. One, gastric fluid level is relatively simple. We know it's 300 milliliters. We know it's so many milligrams. Simple math. But in blood levels, all of those other medications have clinical trial studies, as I've been kind of explaining. So when they went to the FDA, when they wanted to say, I want 5 milligrams a day, twice a day, I want 50 milligrams once a day, whatever they did, whichever drug it is, they had to have numerous clinical trials to show, this is what you're going to get. Those are all published. So you can go and say, if you give me 20, volunteers, and I give them, and they get, you go in basically it's you're locked in for 3 days, so you can't go anywhere. And, they feed you and stuff, and then they give you the medications, and they just draw your blood and get your urine, they get your feces. They ask you if you have any side effects, and at the end, they give you a check. They love college students, because college students need money.
So is that something, calculating the number of pills that a person may have taken to reach certain levels, is that something that you're qualified with your training and experience to do?
Yeah, we teach the medical residents that because, for example, 15-year-old to come in and say, I took 10 Tylenol, and we see this blood level, and we're like, you didn't take 10 Tylenol. So we teach the residents how to calculate how much Tylenol would it get to that blood level, and so we turn around and you can go back to the bedside and say, no, this is at least 50, this is not 10, and they get a little more honest, but it's part of what we do.
I'm going to show you, please, the witness only exhibit 622. Can you see exhibit sticker 622 in front of you?
Yes.
Is this the chart that you prepared as it relates to Lynn Hernan and your calculations?
Yes.
Move for admission of exhibit 622 and request to publish.
No objection.
Exhibit 622 is received. Permission to publish is granted.
And we'll wait for it to pop up on everyone's screens. 1 minute, please. Okay. All right. Mr. Spiller, can you explain how you set up this chart and what's on it?
The far left is the drug name. Then does it has a CNS effect? Does it make you drowsy? Does it make you decrease your respirations? Does it have a cardiovascular effect? Meaning, does it drop your blood pressure? Does it affect your heart rate? Because, you can have a heart attack and be wide awake, you're going to die. So those are the key things. We look for CNS and cardiovascular, because those are the things that really are what get you. And then the fourth is blood level and gastric level. And they're just from the autopsy. I just copied them over from the autopsy. The dosage prescribed, it was originally prescribed as 10 milligrams twice daily, but it was discontinued 7 months earlier. So the expected blood level is that next column, should have been 0. So to get a gastric level and a blood level, because they're different, what's in the gastric has not been absorbed yet. It's additive. You got what's in the stomach and what's in the blood. You would need a minimum of 11 to 13 tablets to do that.
And you're talking right now about the baclofen, is that right?
And so then we just go down one, and there's cyclobenzaprine. And cyclobenzaprine also has a CNS effect and a cardiovascular effect. And again, these are additive. I don't think they talked much about the cardiovascular effect, but it's what we often fight. And then there's the blood and gastric level. And it doesn't, I don't mention here, but no, not cyclobenzaprine, that's later nifedipine. There's a blood level and then the gastric level. And then the next column is, it was also discontinued about 10 months before her death. And so the expected blood level when she was prescribed it was 5 to 10 milligrams 3 times a day. But she wasn't supposed to be taking it, it should be 0. So to get that blood level and gastric level together, it's going to take about 10 to 15 of her 5 milligram tablets. That's to get those two together. Then ropinirole has a I apologize, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Can I get you a throat lozenge?
I'll just get this. And essentially, ropinirole, we have a just a blood level, and it was prescribed 0.5 milligrams once per day. And she had started it 2.5 months before she got that. They were trying to use something for restless leg syndrome. Expected blood level is, if she were taking at 0.5 milligrams once per day, should have been around 1.5. To get to that level, it is roughly 5 to 6 tablets. And then we move down to nifedipine. Nifedipine doesn't really affect the CNS much, but it has a profound effect on the cardiovascular system. It works just on the arteries. Your arteries dilate, and so your blood pressure drops. And it's a major cardiovascular hit. We have 22 nanograms per mil in the blood and 240,000 nanograms per mil in the gastric fluid. They gave her the sustained release. That's what she was given, so you only have to take it once a day. And she's been on it, well, it was filled 2.5 months before her death. Expected blood level is somewhere around 20 to 25, which is what we found. However, there's a bunch of nifedipine in her stomach. There are 3 nifedipine tablets. She's supposed to take 1 a day, and there's 3 attack nifedipine tablets in the stomach.
I want to just stop you with a question. One question about that. Is that a pill that you can crush?
No. It is a wax matrix. And really what it does is it's intended, it goes through the GI tract, comes out, loses its color on the outside, but it comes out looking like the same tablet at the other end, just sort of white. We call it a ghost pill because by the time it is taken all the way through the GI tract, it has released all of the medication it has, and you poop it out, the ghost pill. Some patients have to be told, after they're on it for a while, I keep seeing these pills in my feces, and you say that's normal.
So Lynn crushed, if she wanted to crush pills, she wouldn't be able to crush that particular pill?
No.
Okay. All right. Want to move on to the alprazolam?
Alprazolam is primarily CNS effect. usually it's relatively benign, but I gave it a plus plus when it's taken with an opioid. That's that black box warning that we talked about. And she has, hydrocodone is next. And she has 67 nanograms per mil and 2,500 nanograms in the gastric fluid. She is prescribed 2 milligram tablet, 1 tablet as needed per sleep. So once a day, a 2 milligram tablet. If she takes that as prescribed, should be somewhere around 20, 25. I'm being very conservative here, to be very honest. I say 2 tablets, it might be 3.
You wanted to err on the side of being cautious.
It's the best way. Hydrocodone and the next one, dihydrocodeine or hydrocodone, you should add those 2 together because hydrocodone is the prescription medication. Dihydrocodone or dihydrocodeine or hydrocodone is the metabolite of hydrocodone. So you'll only find that in the blood. You don't find it in the gastric fluid. You find the hydrocodone in the blood and the gastric fluid, but you don't find the hydrocodone in the gastric fluid because it hasn't gotten to the liver yet to be produced. But they're basically the same thing. They're both active mu receptors. And as I said, in Ecuador, that's the one they give you. They don't give you hydrocodone. She has 5 milligrams every 6 hours as needed. Expected blood level, if she's taking that, is about 10 to 15. Is probably, I said 1 to 2, because we haven't added in the hydrocodone, which we know is there, but not in the gastric fluid. And so I don't say any tablets for hydrocodone. There shouldn't be any in the stomach, and there isn't. So it's probably 1 to 2 of Percocet. Acetaminophen is there. It's similar, positive in gastric fluid. We don't know how much. They just say positive. They do say there's 7.7 nanograms per mil in the blood. Oh, no. 4.5 nanograms per mil in the blood. This is the same pill as hydrocodone. It is prescribed as Percocet. So it's 325 acetaminophen, 5 milligrams of hydrocodone. So if there's 1 or 2 hydrocodone, it is the same 1 or 2 of acetaminophen. They're the same tablet. And then tetrahydrozoline. It has a CNS effect. It does have a cardiovascular effect. We've seen it. They'll make you orthostatic hypotension. If you get up, you're going to get dizzy. They have a gastric and a blood level. Dosage, it's not applicable because there is no dose that we're supposed to give you orally. It's so there's no accurate dose what she's supposed to be taking. Expected blood level, if using as prescribed, it's not prescribed. It's just not applicable. It's there. And then the bottom is when you add up all those tablets. And again, I'm using conservative numbers, but you have to take a minimum of 33 to 42 tablets to get to all these levels, to get those gastric levels and those blood levels. To me, this is a polydrug ingestion. This is what we see a lot. You've got handfuls.
Okay, we can take down that exhibit. So it looks to your calculations, Ms. Hernan ingested, she took somewhere conservatively 33 to 42 tablets
Yes.
to reach these various levels.
Yes.
We don't know, do we, precisely when she took them?
No.
But you do calculations knowing half-lives, and from all the scientific literature, you were able to give your best conclusions on that.
A couple of things we looked at, and one is that there is still a fair amount of stuff in the stomach. Stomach is the first part of digestion. It's usually 30 minutes to about 4 hours. It keeps it in the stomach. It starts the digestive process. Stomach acids break down the proteins into amino acids, moves it into the intestines, etc. But it stays in the stomach 30 minutes to 4 hours usually, unless something stops it, like death. So I don't know when she took these, but because we have a we've got 300 mils with big levels on autopsy, it's probably a couple hours before she died.
You had on that chart, and I don't think you addressed the 4.1 milliliters of Visine in her stomach, did you?
Oh, yes.
Can you bring 622 back up again?
Well, that one we could calculate
Okay.
because now we're just doing simple math. There's 300 milliliters. There's 50 milligrams per milliliter of tetrahydrozoline in Visine. You can just do the math. We can do it anywhere, and it'll give you. She took about a teaspoon. About a teaspoon is left. She obviously took more because she has a blood level, but there's about a teaspoon left in the stomach.
That's what 4.1 milliliters is, 1 teaspoon?
Yes. Well, 5 technically is a teaspoon.
5 milliliters
Yeah,
is
it's
a
pretty
teaspoon.
close.
So it's a little shy of a teaspoon.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that could come down, please. We're not able to calculate how much is in the blood?
No, because again, there are no studies using tetrahydrozoline orally. And the FDA didn't require them because it's an ocular and it was not an intended use. And we don't know, for instance, the volume of distribution. There are 2 studies, one of 10 volunteers and one of a 2-year-old. One has a half-life of 4.4 and one has a half-life of 6. So the half-life's probably somewhere between 4 and 6. But we don't know, for instance, the volume of distribution or a number of other things.
Well, when you talk about that number being a teaspoon, if we look at, for example, a Visine bottle, which has, do you know how much milliliters?
15 milliliters.
15 milliliters.
Right, so 3 teaspoons or a tablespoon.
So 3 teaspoons is in the bottle of Visine.
Correct.
And this would be then a third of a bottle,
Yes,
approximately.
yes.
Okay. I'd like to show the witness only exhibit 623. Let me know if you can you see that,
Yes,
Mr. Spiller?
yes,
Is that a chart that you put together
yes.
and will help the jury understand some information about tetrahydrozoline in the blood?
Yes, I
All
hope
right.
so. So I made it.
Okay, I'd like to move for admission of 623 and request permission to publish.
No objection.
Exhibit 623 is received. Permission to publish is granted.
In just a minute, please. 1 minute, sir, while we wait for it to show for all the jury, as usual. That is not redacted, that particular one, but I'm showing.
You're fine.
Okay, Mr. Spiller, so why don't you explain what 623 is? It looks like we've got some blood levels of tetrahydrozoline, and you're discussing some of the effects at peak. Is that right?
Yes,
And these are referring to other articles that you're familiar with that you've studied, right?
yes.
Okay, take us through this exhibit if you would, please, sir.
Okay, the first three rows are the same report. They're all Jennifer Lowry's paper. And they are all 2-year-olds, toddlers. And I have to advance that toddlers are not adults. They, when the first thing you do is like, think of a toddler 2-year-old and say, would you trust them climbing an 18-foot ladder? But you might trust an 18-year-old climbing an 18-foot ladder. The rest of their body is not quite developed. It is not mature yet. So they have somewhat of a more hypersensitive reaction, and we go with great caution in young children just because of this. I can go through many examples why, but just we don't treat toddlers as little adults. So these aren't toddlers. These are 2-year-olds. She got a toddler. At 7 hours, the level was 51.4, and at 12 hours, it was 23.6. Okay. She estimated from that, because we have 2 points on the spectrum, that the half-life was 4.4 hours.
Can you explain half-life to the jury?
Yes. Half-life is when a drug is presented to the liver, and it clears half of it in a certain amount of time, whatever the 10 hours, 4 hours, whatever it is. So say Tylenol. If I take, I have a blood level of 10 of Tylenol, in 4 hours, it's going to clear 5 milligrams. If I have a blood level of 200, it's going to clear 100 in 4 hours. So it takes half of what's there and it clears it. And that's why it's called a half-life. It's a pharmaceutical use, because it's really meant for the pharmaceutical companies to tell them when they can redose you. Like when the blood level is going to fall and not be effective anymore. So the half-life is 4 hours. They know when to redose. But using that half-life, going back at 90 minutes, and I think that's being cautious, it's probably a full blood level at 1 hour, but I go to 90 minutes. That toddler would have had a blood level of 115 when she comes in. The reason is because, again, you can't just order a tetrodotoxin level. Jennifer had to get this and send it off to a lab. But that child, with a level of 115 going down approximately every 4 hours, 4.4 hours, put an oxygen mask on her and that's it. Nothing for her blood pressure, nothing else. They did not intubate her. They did not have to do anything. They call it medical intervention, but trust me, we're really cautious with toddlers, especially when the parents are there. But, so they have an oxygen mask on the child. He's discharged healthy the next morning. And we have an estimated blood level of 115 in a toddler, which I would expect to have a more severe effect with tetrodotoxin than an adult.
Just stopping for a second, Lynn's level was 160, right?
Yes.
Okay.
These following two are also children who came into the, this is in Kansas City, Missouri. 2 more kids came in. They drew the levels, and these are the levels at 2 hours and 3 hours. Oxygen by mask, observation, rapid improvement. These children do well. Trust me, oxygen is harmless, and we go for it. You just give it to them. It's not going to hurt them. But there are things. Intubation is risky in a child. You intubate only when you have to. They're not intubated. Starting pressors and fluids to support a blood pressure is risky. You only do it when you have to. It's not done. So what we've got here is people sitting next to the bedside, very close to bedside, peds ICU. But they basically are drowsy. And these are, this next one is, Kushinko. Okay. This has to do with the mean and the median that we went through before. Her,
Right, we can skip that one. We've
that's the one
discussed it.
there, I described statistical trickery. There's another one. Oh, here it is. 10 cases greater than 100 nanograms per mil. However, you have to look at what the co-ingested drugs were. And you're going to see some nasty drugs there. Fentanyl, morphine, amphetamine, ethanol, diphenhydramine, delta-9 THC is probably just there. But they're not making it with, it's not tetrahydrozoline alone. These are mixed with fentanyl and morphine, we know, are part of the major opiate epidemic. Amphetamine, methamphetamine, ethanol, they're all part of this. But so you have to look at this. This is that same Kashinko paper. She said, yes, I have 10 cases greater than 100. But she doesn't tell you manner or reason of death or anything, but she does tell you they're co-ingestants, and I just put that in there to let you know that would raise I'd be more concerned about fentanyl and morphine, to be honest. And then finally, there is one unknown urine post-ingestion. They have a urine level, and they have a blood level. They have diarrhea, vomiting, lethargy, bradycardia. All they did was observe them. There were no medical interventions. So we have these multiple people coming in where we do have blood levels, and yes, they are in the hospital. They have a doctor and a nurse at their bedside, but intervention like I'm sticking an IV in and I'm going to put in pressors to support your blood pressure, it's not happening. I'm intubating you to get you to breathe. It's not happening. And with my sexual assault, drugs facilitated sexual assault, all these people made it through the night, wake up, get dressed, come in 12 hours later. They have no medical intervention. It is by itself, I'm more afraid of it for it's being used as a Mickey Finn and those sort of things than as a other drug. Because we do know they do that. They do it all the time.
Take down the exhibit. So on the list of drugs that Lynn Hernan ingested, do you have an opinion about what's the least toxic in your opinion? Or
That acetaminophen level of 4.5 is one tablet. It's like it took up one Tylenol.
Okay. And where does tetrahydrozoline fall in the seriousness on the list of drugs in Lynn Hernan?
At the bottom.
At the bottom. Is it, well, let's bring up your report again. And that's 545A. 1 minute. Here we go. Just takes a minute. What about if somebody was, you said that taking tetrahydrozoline can cause a person to become dizzy, or people use it in these sexual assaults.
Yes.
What do you think about somebody taking tetrahydrozoline in a bottle and becoming affected by it to a degree, for example, where somebody could sexually assault them, and we don't have that here. But if somebody got to that level, can you imagine forcing 35 or 40 pills down their throat at that point?
No, the histories we get from them are, usually with alcohol. They're on some sort of date rape is a terrible word because it's not a date, but they're on some sort of outing. And it gets put in their drink. And their description is they start to feel really weird, dizzy. And then they have a period they don't remember. And they often say, I came back too, because you could touch these people, physically touch them. And they kind of wake up and they say, then I saw him in the bed. And then they kind of go out and then they wake up the next morning. They have multiple awakenings. Not long, and usually not sufficient to get out of there right away.
You said that you think that the ingestion was relatively recent of the substances in inlet.
I'm just using that there are 300 mils of gastric fluid. That's not going to be 8 hours earlier. I don't know the time. 2 hours seems fair, but I'm not opining when it happened. It's not the day before, because she still has it in her gastric fluid.
When you're looking at things at the poison center and what somebody has ingested, do you consider their health?
Absolutely.
Other things that might be going on with them?
Absolutely.
Like whether they've got liver problems or heart problems, those things matter?
Oh, yeah. Do they have diabetes? Do they have what we call metabolic syndrome? Do they have heart problems? They got blood pressure problems? Do they have this, that? We usually try and go through their medication list. That gives us a hint. If there's a family member with them, we'll go through that with them, that sort of thing. But yeah, we try and find out what we're facing, because often the patient isn't all that helpful.
Do you have any information about Lynn Hernan and her health or her mobility or other factors that might affect her tolerance for medications?
Yeah, they gave me the medical records for like a year before.
Okay, so what things matter?
Well, she gained 100 pounds.
Okay, that's a big factor.
Right. She's recently put on nifedipine. The nifedipine was started, at least that's when it was filled 2.5 months before. That's a blood pressure medication. She's starting to get metabolic syndrome, gaining weight, blood pressure's going up, a number of other things.
Were you able to listen by maybe by Zoom or some other way to certain parts of this trial when the medical examiner and Dr. Kaczynko testified?
Yes.
You listened to
Just those two.
Just those two? Would you agree that they seem to focus on CNS changes?
Exclusively. I'm
Hold
sorry.
on, there's been an objection. Sustained is to the form of the question.
You listened to the testimony. What did they seem to focus on that we've been talking about here today?
The CNS depressant effects of the medications on the list.
What else should be focused on?
Cardiovascular effects,
Why would that be?
because that'll kill you too.
So what about
You got 3 major organs. You have the brain, the lungs, and the heart. Your liver and kidneys, even if they fail, you probably have 5-6 days or something to live. But your brain, your lungs, your heart, you're going down.
Hold on, there's been an objection.
I think it's a violation of the court's order.
We moving to strike.
Yes.
That's the case. Striking in general.
No, I understand. I'll overrule it, but caution the witness not to violate any pretrial rulings made in this case.
Yes, Your Honor. I'm sorry if I did.
No, you didn't.
Oh,
Go ahead.
okay.
Go ahead, you can finish, but we can't talk the specific.
All right. Yes, we focus on cardiovascular because if blood pressure drops, your heart stops, you're going to be dead. CNS, you can get comatose, but the problem is if you get comatose, you often stop breathing. So that's the big thing. Are you going to stop breathing? And they focused only on the CNS and did it stop her breathing. They didn't focus on these other effects, dropping her blood pressure. And again, it goes back to that 5-legged stool. We keep knocking one leg out and knocking one leg out. Eventually the stool is going to fall over. But you focus on those are the key ones emergently, then, you take the whole picture in.
So it sounds like you're saying that what needs to be focused on really is all of these drugs. Might be called a poly drug.
I'm gonna object again at this point. The suggestion violates this court's order.
Sustain, rephrase.
Did Ms. Hernan have, did she have a large quantity of drugs in her system? She did, right?
Yes.
And what, when you hear the term poly drug, what does that mean?
I usually use it when it's more than 2.
Okay,
When we've got 3, 4, 5, 6, people will, empty the medicine cabinet, and they'll have 4, 5, 6, that sort of thing. Because it has this additive effect. Most people don't know what's going to hurt them. So they just take it all.
you said that you have experience at your poison centers with suicides, is that right?
Yes.
Do suicides, from your experience working decades in poison control center, do suicide rates go up or down as a person, as people age?
The highest rate is in the 40s to the 60s. But I do have to caution you that adolescence 12 to 19 is rising rapidly. But historically, for the past 40 years, it's 40s, 50s, 60s. But the adolescents, we're concerned about potential screen time. We don't know what it is. Is it social media? But it's increasing in adolescence since 2009.
Well, it sounds like that's something that we got to be taking into consideration and doing research on to try to stop that.
I published it.
Did you publish on that? Okay.
We are. I think we try.
Have you, in your career of decades working in the poison control center, seen cases of people dying from suicide by mixing drugs?
Yes.
Have you seen that in women?
Yes.
And the testimony that you've given here today, sir, is that to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, then this will be a good stopping point for the lunch hour, given it is 11:59 a.m. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, just the same admonition. Please do not discuss this case among yourselves. Do not do any research. Do not listen or view any news or media reports regarding the case. Enjoy your lunch. I'm hoping to bring you back at 1 to start with the cross-exam. I'll let the bailiffs know shortly. All rise for the jury. All right, thank you. Be seated. Sir, you can step down. I just need to put a sidebar on the record. There was an objection during.
I'll put this back on so I can hear you.
Okay, you can step down though too and sit in the back. There was an objection during the testimony related to Exhibit 211, where the question by Attorney Kukler was something to the effect of asking the witness about whether there was an opinion or information in the chart was not correct. There was an objection. Attorney Nikolai asked for a sidebar, and then at sidebar, we had a discussion regarding the court's ruling regarding the level that was reported in the one page that I saw as it relates to the victim in the Colorado case. The reference in 211 is to something that was reported on in the media, not any official documents. And I indicated I would not hang on that because it was really a backdoor way of violating my ruling prohibiting the witness from discussing that result, meaning the result that he is aware of for tetrahydrozoline in that victim's system because of the lack of reports that have been provided to the state and the due process issues that go along with it. And I believe that would be a violation of their right of confrontation and cross-examination. Anything the state wants to add to that sidebar?
No, thank you.
How about the defense?
No.
All right, then please be back here at 1 o'clock to commence with cross, and we'll talk off the record about whether defense needs any conversation time, okay? Thank you.
Oops. I missed when she said we were coming back. Let's rewind that just a bit. Let's see.
Discussing that result, meaning the result that he is aware of for tetrahydrozoline in that victim's system because of the lack of reports that have been provided to the state and the due process issues that go along with it. And I believe that would be a violation of their right of confrontation and cross-examination. Anything the state wants to add to that sidebar?
No, thank you.
How about the defense?
No.
All right, then please be back here at 1 o'clock to commence with cross, and we'll talk off the record about whether defense needs any conversation time, okay? Thank you.
Okay, so sounds like just the hour-long break. Let's see. Okay, I'm not seeing anything. My computer was having some issues with speed. I'm thinking maybe what we do is take a break and do an afternoon session and come back in just under an hour. So a 55-minute break. Let's do that. And I'll have a complete reboot done and we'll be ready to go. So see you in just under 55 minutes. We'll see you then.